there's nothing wrong with whoever you are, no matter what certain parts of society might make you feel like. Be whoever you are, just be the best version of it.
I mean, without further ado, I'll just, if everyone's good, we'll crack on and I'll introduce Ranj. Why don't we give Ranj a round of applause to begin with.
I haven't said anything yet.
I know, that's why we get it in now. Where we're going to go, I've asked if we can talk about Ranj's journey into kind of medicine and then into media and the creative stuff. And then later on, we're going to talk a little bit about, Ranj has a lot of lived experience around that whole topic of diversity and inclusion, that sense of otherness, representation. We want to dig into some of that, so that'll come in a bit. And then we're going to have a bit of Q&A at the end. So if you've thoughts, and you've said nothing is off topic.
Yeah.
So you can ask anything. We might not answer everything, but yeah. So think about, as we're talking, if there's stuff you want to ask. We met on a cruise ship without sounding like a parent.
Pensioners. Really dodgy.
Didn't we? We did though.
Quite dodgy though. Weren't we? Hang on. Like, weren't we stumbling around on a net?
Nothing's off topic. We were. Yeah.
Yeah. It was in Barcelona.
Oh.
One night in Barcelona. I was literally just there for one night on the launch of a cruise ship, and randomly
I think
to be there.
And I got the selfie. Yeah. And I got a weird one with you, Conchita from Eurovision, and like as a group photo. Do you remember that, in that weird hall of mirrors?
Oh yeah.
I sent it to my mum, and the silence was deafening. Hear her head exploding. Anyway,
it was a weird night.
It was a weird night. But since then, Ranj has become a friend of Doodle Doo, and I'm really glad that you take this time. If you saw his schedule, you'd be like, why are you here? But he is. So why don't we start? Give us a picture of like growing up and getting into medicine, what that looked like for you.
Crikey. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming along and listening to my rambles, and that's what I tend to do. So I'm not from Manchester. I grew up in Kent, which is way down in the southeast, just past London. I'd like to describe my life as a bit messy, I suppose, in a good way, because I think mess is beautiful. So I grew up, I'm from a working class family. I got two younger brothers, basically grew up with not really much going on, and then just had a bunch of dreams and thought, I really want to do something. I really want to, and was encouraged to really do something, I suppose. And medicine for me was kind of not my first choice, interestingly. I was looking back, quite a creative kid. I wanted to do art, I wanted to do music, but my parents were kind of like, yeah, you're not doing that. Because it's really hard to get jobs in those fields. And I was like, looking back, you were absolutely right. But luckily, I was quite academic as well. And so I ended up going down an academic route. So I was the first person, probably in my family, I think, to get any sort of qualification. And then, went into... I would say I did the sort of conventional thing, went through school, went through university down in London, and then kind of came out into the big wild world at the age of 23 was when I qualified. So I've been a doctor for 20 years this year, which is weird saying that because it makes me feel really old. So basically I had quite...
On the way, got his first GCSE when he was 8 years old.
Yeah, but this is there. Sounds really impressive. It's really not. So my parents, because they come from quite a traditional Indian background, my parents made me and my brothers go to a Sunday school every Sunday to learn Punjabi, which is my family's language, and from where we're from in India. And the only exit strategy that we were allowed was once you have a GCSE in it, you don't have to go anymore. So I literally took them at their word. And at the age of 8, I was like, right, I'm out of here. I'm not doing this. Don't know how I managed it, but I got my Sundays back, which was fantastic. But that's why it sounds super impressive. I remember going into my junior school and going to see my headmaster because I was crap at sport. I still am crap at sport. But everyone in our school assemblies would get like badges and like certificates for swimming achievements and sporting stuff. And I'd be like, oh, I'm never going to get one of them. So when I got this certificate, when I got my GCSE, I took it into my headmaster's office there. Can you do that thing where you present present people with certificates? Can I do that as well? Because this is, let's be honest, the only thing I'm going to get. And the look on his face was just like, do you know what this is? And I was like, I haven't got a bloody clue what this is. It's a certificate. Can you just do that thing? So it was my way. It sounds impressive, but it was my way of getting out of Sunday school. But yeah, so I had quite, I guess, sort of a conventional route. And often people who do things like medicine often do. You go through school, you've got to go get certain A levels, you've got to go into university, spend a bunch of time there, and you come out the other end and you go straight into the NHS. And that's kind of basically what my life was till about sort of 23. That creative side of me kind of got put to one side and I thought, right, I've got to knuckle down. I've got to, I've got to make sure that I get the grades that I need to get and tick all of my boxes and get into that job. And it was very much like a factory line. And then I kind of got out the other end and thought, oh, I'm here now. I've got my degree that I basically devoted my entire life to, but I don't quite feel like this is it. I don't feel as fulfilled as I wanted to be, and I thought I would be. And then it was only kind of sort of 5 years in when I was a junior doctor full time, and then 5 years in, I just thought, this is hard work. Firstly, and secondly, I need an outlet. Like it feels like this isn't enough, which sounds stupid, because medicine's a really full-on career and it's amazing and I love it and I still do it. I work part-time. I tend to do weekends in hospital and during the week all the other crazy stuff. But weirdly, it just didn't feel enough. And I think it was because that creative sort of bit of me that has always, been keen to get out, wanted to kind of say, hang on, I want to do something as well. And that's kind of, I think, how the sort of inspiration to kind of get into the media kind of stuff happened.
So, I mean, tell us about that then. How do you're in medicine?
Yeah.
And probably working 50 hours a week.
Yeah, around about 60 hours a week at that time, yeah.
How do you, where's the opportunity come from? What happens? Like, are you pushing doors? Does it come to you?
Well, weirdly, so I'd done little bits of like creative stuff along the way, nothing TV related at all. And I didn't leave university thinking I want to be on telly. That's absolutely the last thing I was thinking about. Plus, you train to do stuff like that. And it was very much outside of my comfort zone, not really my thing. And I just thought, I need to do something else. I need to do something alongside what I'm doing because I feel like I'm a little bit trapped and I feel like I'm not really feeling as satisfied and fulfilled as I wanted to. So I saw this advert. The BBC were looking for, we're talking over 10 years ago now, we're looking for a young people's doctor or a person who specialised in sort of kids and young people to kind of just advise them and give them some ideas for some of their programming. And I work in paediatrics, so I look after kids and young people. That's my day job. And I sort of got in touch with them and said, look, I've got zero experience, but I am quite passionate about stuff that affects young people. They were looking at the 16 to 25 sort of age group then. And, I've got a bunch of ideas. And if you ever need someone just to come in and throw some stuff at you or look over things that you might want to cover on your show. And so I had a coffee with this producer and she was, Amy Burton was her name. I still remember her. She was kind of like, sure, when can you start? And I was like, hang on a minute. So I did it initially just as a hobby. It was unpaid, but I loved doing it because I went in and I was just basically giving them ideas of, it was for a show that was on BBC Two at the time and online. It was part of the whole Radio 1 surgery kind of group. So it was called BBC Switch. So it was catering towards 16 to 25s. It was kind of very much what BBC Three does now. And it for my sort of remit was giving them sort of health and well-being sort of ideas and looking over some of their content. And it was fun. It was taking literally my day job into another field and feeling like, actually, I'm being creative with it now. I've got all these stuff that I've learned. I can now take it somewhere else and exercise my creativity a bit. Did it for free, did it for fun. And then over time, my name sort of started to get passed around. Like people were like, oh, have you thought about doing this? And again, I was just doing stuff for free because it was a laugh. So I did CBeebies news round. I'd go on and talk about something which was really cool for me because I'd grown up watching it.
So that was your first on-screen stuff, was it?
My on-screen stuff was with BBC Switch back in the day, and then my name just sort of got passed about, and I just, whenever I could fit it in with work, I used to pop along and be like a couch doctor, as it were, and then it got to a point where people started saying to me, have you thought about auditioning for stuff like presentery kind of things? And I was like, no, of course not. Like, don't be ridiculous. I've got a job. And this isn't really my field. But people were just like, you know what, why don't you give it a go? Push yourself out of your comfort zone. And that's pretty much been my thing ever since, is I think real progress and sometimes happiness comes outside your comfort zone. We all feel, I'd lived kind of up until that point in my safety sort of area for so long that actually it was outside of that when I really started to feel like now I'm living life a bit more, now I'm enjoying it.
So give us a time period. When's that happening?
So, oh gosh, that was when I was like 20, that was 29-ish.
So 2009.
So, no, I was 29. So, so that was, wow, probably 2008-ish. Yeah, 2008, 2009-ish. Yeah, you might be right.
Yeah. And you know, not a weird stalker, we're the same age. So
Oh, yeah.
I know roughly when it... So you've got this gig with BBC.
Yep.
Then what comes next? Is it because, I mean, we could go through the career, but we've got CBeebies, we've got This Morning, we've got Morning Live, we've got Strictly, we've got Cooking with the Stars.
Weirdly, I just kind of let it happen for a bit. So I bounced around from BBC to Channel 5 when Gabby Roslin was doing a show then. Not Gabby Roslin, Gabby Logan. Gabby Roslin I work with occasionally now. And I just bounced about. And then it was very much like people were like saying, do you know what you should do? Start auditioning for stuff to actually be a bit more substantial and get yourself an agent. And this was all ridiculous to me because I was like, I've got a job. I've got a full-time job. I'm not trained in this at all. I'm literally doing this as a hobby. And people, I started to get more and more people saying, no, actually, I think you should take it a bit more seriously. So I had a few meetings, and it wasn't anything substantial. I had a few meetings with a couple of agents because I just literally wrote to them and said, I've been kind of advised to just talk to some agents and see whether you might, take me on or whatever. And all of them were like, I'm sorry, like, who the hell are you? And secondly, but a couple of them were really nice and had a coffee with me. And there was one lady called Nicola Iverson who used to work for James Grant, which is now YMU, which is Philip Schofield's agency. The one that looks after Ant and Dec and used to look after Holly, etc. and Ryland. I had a meeting with her and she said to me, she goes, Fab, I can see where you're coming from. I get it. She goes, come up with an idea that only you can do and then take that to a television company or a production company. I was like, okay, fair enough. Because she was like, you know, there's lots of different things that you could potentially do, but come up with something only you can do. Because you've got to settle yourself, right? So I was like, right, fair enough. And then the idea for, this is going to sound really creepy, for a kids show came to me in the shower. That's really weird. But bear with me. I do all of my thinking in the shower. And the idea for a show about going to the doctor came to me and I thought, oh, maybe there's something in that because I can do that because it's very much related to what I do for work. And I took it to a production company. I happened to have a friend that was working for them at the time and he was like, come in, have a chat with them. And the idea for Get Well Soon, which is a CBeebies show, was born. And it was kind of molded. We co-created it together. It turned from one thing into something very different. Puppets got involved, and then they go, yeah, exactly. And then I started they were like, how do you feel about singing? Right, yeah, let's throw that in the mix as well. And 3 series later and an app, we've got 2 BAFTAs out of it, which was like completely unexpected. But again, it was just like, take that chance, just come up with something, put yourself, and I'm very much like, throw yourself into opportunities. Some of them will stick and some of them won't, but unless you try, you just don't know. And it's not about having a thick skin. I think it's just more about saying, I'll give it a go. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I've literally winged my entire career because I'm not, right? And then that kind of CBeebies led to my spot on This Morning, which I was on for 10 years. And if you've been listening to the news or watching the news recently, spectacularly left a couple of years ago. But then I've also done Extreme Food Phobics, I've done Cooking with the Stars, I've done Strictly, which was a massive highlight for me, and various other, and now I spend half my week in Manchester. So if any of you are aware, BBC Morning Live, their daytime show, which is on at 9:15 every morning, second most popular daytime show in the country, by the way, thrashing most other shows in the ratings, is actually based up at the ABC building on Key Street. And it transmits from there every day, and I'm one of their doctors. So it's kind of got like from just doing it as a hobby to really lots of really, really cool stuff. But that's why I've had to go part-time with my medical job, because I just couldn't do it all. I burned out about 5 years ago trying to do it all. And I had to take a year out of medicine to be like, okay, because I work in A&E, I work in children's A&E and intensive care. It's pretty intense most of the time. And I was trying to do everything, and I had to actually say, stop, I can't, I need to take a bit of a breather and just refocus on stuff. So I do my medicine part-time, tend to do that on the weekends, and then I do all the other wonderful, cool stuff Monday to Friday, like going to Barcelona and getting drunk on a cruise ship.
And then, I mean, to flip it the other way as well, though, during COVID, you pulled back from a lot of media stuff, didn't you, to be more present in the hospitals and stuff?
Well, that was kind of, firstly, it's because media went completely quiet during the pandemic, as you would expect. But also, secondly, because I was like, right, now I can step up my clinical bit. So I flex my clinical and non-clinical work. So I was like, when one goes quieter, I can up one. And when that one goes quieter, I can do, or when one gets busy, I can, do less of the other one. But for me, during that time, it was important also to go back and not go back, but just to do more of it. People always say, did you go back? And I was like, I didn't really leave. I'm still kind of doing it. I just did more of it. And that was really lucky for me. So if you work in any sort of industry where you're kind of freelancing, you're kind of doing bits here and there, it's really hard to have any security. Like, that's the really, really difficult part of it, is that, and it's quite stressful not having that security, but I'm really lucky that, and a lot of my friends who work in entertainment and performance, like West End performance, the lady who plays Elphaba, she, when theatres went down, there's nothing wrong with it, but she had to go work in Sainsbury's. But that's what you had to do. And I was really lucky that I have this backup job. I shouldn't call it a backup job, but I have this thing that I can always fall back on. And during the pandemic, it was like the perfect thing for me.
I want to dart around a little bit. I've got loads of like strictly come dancing questions and stuff. But
go on, everyone
we'll
wants to know. Go on. Go on.
No, we'll come back to
I
it in a
did
bit.
not sleep with my partner, I can tell you that much.
Well done. There's a couple of you then. The reason I asked you about the sort of time frames is because I want to dart around a little bit into the sort of personal life and you're someone who's vocal on, certainly on social media, but also you have been behind closed doors as well with TV execs and stuff like that. You've a passion for culture and this lived experience. So 2009, all of this TV stuff and media stuff starting to happen, but it does coincide with you coming out.
Yeah.
And coming out to your wife. So you're married. So yeah, you can give us some of this story, but I suppose I'm slightly interested. Is that a coincidence where you finding yourself and feeling freer, all of that sort of
Yeah,
stuff? Maybe tears up with the
making sense of,
story
yeah, it's more making
first.
sense of the mess of my life, I suppose, in a way. Um, I think I'm now 44. I turned 44 last week, a couple of weeks ago. It's a bit of a blur. I think I've spent 44 years of my life trying to work out who I am, and I'm still trying to work out who I am. And when I was about 30, up until sort of, I went through a very conventional sort of early life, as I was saying, and I kind of, similar to where my mind was career wise, like life wise, I was like, right, this is my happiness. This is where I'm going to go. I want a family. I want to do X. I want to have that perfect sort of life, as it were. And I thought that's where my happiness was. And it's only when I got there, I thought, again, like I did with medicine, I don't feel like this is it. I don't feel like this is everything that I am. And there's a part of me that isn't feeling heard or seen, or as if they're, as if I'm working at 100%. So around the time when I was 30 was when I came out as my authentic self. And that was kind of like tricky because I'd been married. I'd been with someone for 5 years. I'd been married for 3 years. And yeah, that wasn't the easiest process, I think. It was quite tough, as you can imagine. Culturally, it's quite tough because South Asian people tend to be quite traditional in many ways, but also just generally in life, identity wise, it was all. I describe it as I remember at 30 that I fractured and there was all these pieces and I didn't have a clue how to put them back together again, and it took a while to get that. But it's in those periods when someone said to me recently, when nothing is certain, anything is possible. And it was only then when I was able to rebuild, I was like, I can now rebuild myself and be whoever I want to be. And I can, and my key thing was to be as authentic as I possibly can be, because you only get one life. You only get one chance, well, most of us do. So you've got to be the best you can be in whoever you are. And I've very much since then tried to live by that, that there's nothing wrong with whoever you are, no matter what certain parts of society might make you feel like. Be whoever you are, just be the best version of it and be as authentic as you can be. And because of that, it really felt like, right, I can now do whatever I want to do and then anything I've dreamed of doing. And that did kind of coincide with the media stuff. It kind of just, my creative side was finally allowed to be. I was like, well, I can do anything now. It doesn't matter. Like I've gone straight back. Well, I haven't gone straight back to square one, but it felt like I'd gone straight back. I was like, right, now I'm going to do it my way. And that, just that momentary realization completely changed the trajectory of life for me. But I've never been happier.
Good. What was the tipping point? Like and you skirt over it like, and you're a glass half full guy, right? So, like, oh, this was, but we don't know who's in the room struggling with the same sorts of things,
Yeah.
with the same masks. What are you feeling at the time when you're not out and you're not you and people don't know,
Yeah.
and you're in a relationship with someone you really care about,
Yeah.
presumably,
Yeah.
but no, this is a sledgehammer. You're experiencing that for yourself as well. What are you feeling at that point?
You're talking about sort of 14, 15 years ago, society's attitudes towards it all were very different as my experience of it all. But at the time, I just remember thinking, this can't be it. As wonderful as my situation was at the time, and it wasn't that it wasn't problematic more than any other relationship would be. I just couldn't shake that feeling that this is not 100% me, and thinking that the longer this goes on, the more that is going to become an issue. And like I said, life is only worth living if you can do it 100%. And I appreciate that not everyone can. It's not safe for everyone to be 100% authentic. It's not, not all of us are fortunate enough to come from backgrounds or live in societies where we are able to fully be ourselves. We'd love that, but we have to appreciate that for some people it's dangerous. So I say this with that caveat, but for me it was kind of like, I'm only going to get one chance at this, and I have to make the most of it, and I have to be me, and I have to be true. That was the key thing for me. I was like, I'm feeling unhappy at the moment, and I'm unhappy because there's a part of me that's saying, you're not being true to yourself, and you've got to be true to yourself.
So it's not necessarily that you'd hit rock bottom,
No.
and which is maybe you'd make that assumption, but it was just a sense that you weren't being authentic.
Yeah, that's what it was. And the problem is, when you've got that in the back of your mind, that has an effect on your relationship. And so things were getting trickier and trickier and trickier, and I just thought, no, this can't be it. This can't be it. And then I went into counselling for a bit, thinking, what the hell is going on? And it was only then when counselling only works if you're 100% brutally honest with everything. And that's when I thought, okay, do you know what? There's a whole part of me that I've not paid any attention to because I didn't think it was important. And it wasn't part of who I wanted to be and wasn't part of how I wanted my life to be. And I thought, well, maybe now's the time to actually think about that quite seriously. And that's when I thought, right, I need to make some changes.
Amazing. Since then, you've been an advocate and a champion for lots of people, and in lots of ways. You've won awards in that space. You've been on magazine covers, but I suppose, like looking in this room, and as an agency owner, even things like recruitment, and we had the I remember particularly the Black Lives Matter sort of period of time, which obviously should be all the time, but that period when it became the hot topic, probably 3 years ago. And I remember talking to friends and actually my church community who gathered, and we really for the first time had open conversations about. And I remember middle-aged, white, straight, middle class, like I'm the most privileged section, right? And just having blind spots all over the place, and then also just wrestling with what's my role in this, right? And I remember this beautiful lady just saying that, and it's a stupid thing, but I remember her saying, "I've never had a plaster my skin colour."
Yeah.
I thought, I've never even thought about plasters being a skin colour, right? But all these little cues that you don't belong and give you this sense of otherness, and I felt heartbroken for this woman, and since then we've recruited, and you think part of my, I'm just gonna be honest about my thinking, right? And I might get slammed for it, whatever, I don't know, but I don't know what I don't know. But I remember thinking, I don't want anyone working here thinking they're not here on merit. Does that make sense? And I remember having a chat with a friend. I was like, how do I? We did a bursary grant for filmmakers, and part of that was like, do we make it for BAME like filmmakers? And then a few people are like, you're going to get criticised for that, or it's going to be, and then you're like, well, I don't know. What do you what do you think we do? Like, how can we all be part of, whether we belong to those minority groups or we'd identify with those minority groups, or whether we're not? What's the key? Give us some thoughts on that.
Just
under the bus. There you go.
I'm a massive believer that only through diversity is where you're really going to get amazing stuff happening. All of us have intersections. We have different parts of our identity, whether that's background, gender, identity, sexuality, whatever it might be, culture, we bring those together. And when they come together, at those crossroads is where you have magic happening. And so the more of that magic you can have from a company perspective, the better. Because all of that, those sort of intersections bring experience and they bring insights and diversity of thought. All of that stuff is fantastic. To actually make that happen in real life is really hard. And what we've all got to remember is that as much as we'd love to say that, you know, we're all on an even keel, we're not all on even platforms. We're not all in the same playing field. Some of us are on, you know, much smaller fields than others, and some of us are excluded altogether. There's a report that came up, let's talk about media specifically. There's a report, Diamond is an organisation that monitors diversity in media, and a report came out, I think, earlier this week that showed, surprise, surprise, women are massively underrepresented in senior media roles. Disabled people or differently able people, massively underrepresented. Neurodivergent people and people from non-white backgrounds. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. Catalysts like Black Lives Matter were so important for so many reasons, but it woke people up a bit. But I worry that we may just say, okay, well, we've ticked that box now. And it's not about that, because you've got to remember, when you do diversity inclusion, you actually got to think, who are we excluding? So who needs a seat at this table that isn't? Who are we not hearing? So often you'll find that people will do diversity inclusion and only do certain bits of it and forget certain communities, particularly differently abled people, particularly South Asian people. So South Asian people are the biggest ethnic minority in this country. We make up 10% of the population almost. Our representation in media is close to 2 to 3%. So it's massively underrepresented. And that is reflected in other communities, but there's a lot of work to be done. 20% of the population are differently abled or disabled, but we hardly see any of those people represented on our screens. So don't feel bad if you feel like you're positively discriminating for those groups, because you've got to remember that they're not on the same platform as everyone else. They don't get the same opportunities to be heard or seen in that space. And that same thing applies to, you know, different genders as well. They don't always get the same volume. They're not. So if you give them an amplifier and you're doing that and you feel like, hang on, am I doing this for the right reasons? Just remember, all you're trying to do is level the playing field, first of all. And then everyone gets to, you know, showcase how good they are, because they are good. It's just they haven't been seen or heard because they don't get to be seen or heard. And we've got to remember that even coming up, a lot of people aren't given the opportunities to get to the same place as everybody else. So don't feel bad, I think, or conscious about being actively sort of promoting that and sort of looking for that. If you want to be diverse, though, you're going to have to do more work. You have to make more of an effort, and that's without a doubt. So people say that a lot of my friend was casting for a theatre show and they wanted people from diverse backgrounds. They're like, no one's coming forward. Everyone we're getting is from a certain sort of look and identity. And I was like, well, that's because you've got to go and find them, because they probably don't even get to see the advert. And that's the trick. And that's what you've got to remember, is that it is harder for certain people. And I'm not just talking about culture and race here. I'm talking about every kind of sort of, you know, identity, as it were, or background. You've got to go and make that effort if you want it. And what you've got to do is look at wherever you work and say, are we being proportionally representative? Do we reflect society? Because when you do, that's when the magic is going to happen. That's when you're going to get that diversity of thought, as well as diversity of ideas, as well as diversity of people.
Positive discrimination is a bit of a phrase that you just used,
buzzword.
And I think a lot of people recoil and go, it's still discrimination, right? An interesting conversation I had with an agency owner in Manchester who's black and gay, and I was chatting to him. I was like, how do I recruit feeling like this? I want people here on merit. I've got this positive discrimination. It feels really uncomfortable to me. And he turned it around and he said, what I would say to black people or BAME people applying is like, you're being given some privilege. Everyone else has been using that.
Yeah.
Don't feel bad about using
Yeah.
it. And it turned a little light on for me. I thought, actually, that's a really good way. Like, I might not knowingly have leveraged my own privilege, but I have nevertheless leveraged it, right? You are an author now.
Yes.
You've just a new.
So I haven't got enough to do.
A new new book deal.
Yeah.
So congratulations on that.
Yeah.
But after our Barcelona expedition, it's coming up to 10 o'clock. We're going to run over. If you need to go, please do. You really kindly said, I've got 3 girls. You sent the kids' books and all this. You'll see some of the books out there. How have you, because you haven't just stumbled into, the illustrations and the representation in that book is really considered. How and why did you go about that?
So for those of you who don't know, of late, sort of basically just before the pandemic, I got approached to start writing kids' books, which is really, really fortunate, and I'm massively grateful for it. But I'm not a writer, so it was a massive learning experience for me. And I've written a bunch of books, some slightly older. So there's a grown-up guide for boys. There's a sort of learning and mental well-being guide for slightly younger kids. My latest one was called How to Be a Boy and Do It Your Own Way, which has nothing to do with how to be a boy. It's actually how to be a decent human being. And alongside that, I've got some picture books as well, the superhero series, which is what we're kind of working on, something in relation to that together. With the picture books, they're aimed at sort of 3 to 5 year olds. It was all about celebrating beautiful qualities that human beings have. Started in the pandemic with Superhero Like You, which was actually celebrating everyday people who do wonderful things, especially during the pandemic, that were helping us through. Everyone from, people that stock your shelves right through to the people that work in hospitals, etc. So it started with that. And then it went to Superpower Like Mine, which was celebrating inherent qualities that we all have that we can treat as superpowers. The next one's going to be called Super Family Like Ours, which celebrates different kinds of family unit. But I was really, really keen throughout these picture books, which are aimed at little ones, to be deliberately, unashamedly, offensively diverse, almost. So all of the characters that I don't draw, that we had an illustrator create them, but I had creative input into them. Every single character, every single page has that sort of diversity. I wanted it to appeal to as many little ones as possible and their families. So it's all been looked at through that lens. So you've got characters in there with different abilities. We've got an illustrated character who's got Down syndrome. You don't see kids with Down syndrome in books. You just don't see it. So we've got everyone from a black girl in a wheelchair. You don't see that in kids' books. Through to there's a kid who's actually autistic, so you don't see his divergence, but he's based on my nephew. Through to a kid that's got 2 mums, and he's proudly got a Pride Progress flag on his bedroom wall. But that stuff all happens incidentally. It's just because little ones don't see that, but what they will is see it as the world that they live in and see themselves in it. And that's what I wanted to do, and that's why I've tried to make those picture books as diverse as I possibly can. But it's not diverse, it's just a way of including as many people as I can and saying, I want you to be able to see a bit of yourself, and I want you to see the world reflected in all its beauty and all its different ways, because that's what we should be doing in kids books.
Love that. I want to make way for some questions. So over to you guys. Anyone got burning questions?
Hello.
Oh yeah.
Hi. Sorry, I'll stand up. Hello. So my name's Alex. I'm a freelance production manager and a queer bookshop owner. Obviously, you've talked about what industry can do to help marginalised communities within the creative industries. What advice would you give to marginalised or queer or disabled, like myself, people who are making their way in different areas of the creative industries? What would you say to us as how to get to it? Big question.
Gosh, big question. I wouldn't want to talk for people from, like, for instance, the disabled community, because I haven't got that experience, but I'll try and give I guess, more insights from my side of it, from where I've seen it, as a queer person myself, and from a an Asian background and etc. Find the champions that are already there. There are lots of champions that. So I don't feel like I in a speech once I said I stand on the shoulders of giants and I borrow the wings of angels, because I'm here for the kindness of others, and that's why I've been able to do so many of the really lucky stuff that I've done is because of other people. It's not always, it sounds like it's me sort of forging my way through, but it's also because of all the people around me. The reason I was able to pull myself together after I fell apart when I came out was because of my chosen family that surrounded themselves, that I didn't really realise I had. Find the champions that are around you. Look for the people, look for the kind people who can help you through that. Because especially from those communities, when someone from those marginalised communities ends up in a place where they've got a bit of say and got a bit of power and got a bit of that privilege, do you know what we do? We always pull other people with us. And I love that about our community, and I love that about any marginalised community, because it's only when we start doing that and helping other people up that I think we're really going to see change and help other people in. So that's what I would say. That's what I've done, is find those champions and sort of say, can I just have a chat? Like, I've got this. You're more than welcome.
Anybody else?
Very much like James, I'm middle class white, all those privileges. But how can I do allyship better? I run my own business. What are the sorts of things that I can do that can help it, with diversity and what we'll be talking about just now?
Allyship's a really interesting topic. Allyship, I think the way to do any kind of allyship, whether it's gender-based, background-based, race-based, sexuality-based, whatever it might be, is the key thing is not about making it about yourself. It's about making it about the person who you're trying to be an ally to. Ask them, how can I be better? What can I do? How can I use what I've got to support you? And take your steer from them. Most people who want to be allies have the right intention, but you've got to remember why you're doing it and who you're doing it for. It's not to make yourself feel better. It's actually to make it better for other people. And I think the very fact that you're asking is massive. I think that's really, really important. I wish more people would ask. Don't feel bad about your privileges and where you come from. The worst part, there's nothing wrong. I've had so many conversations about privilege over the years, because people automatically get their backs up about it. They're like, well, it's not my fault. Why are you penalising me for who I am? I was like, we're not penalising you for having any kind of privilege, but if you don't do anything with it, then that's a problem. Recognising that you've got it is one thing, but use it to do something great for somebody else. We're all just here to help we're all here to help each other, right? And various people in this room will have differing levels of privilege. So help each other out. Some of us have been luckier than others. But yeah, I think one, the fact that you're asking, but two, ask the people that you want to be allies to and say, can I learn from you? What can I do better? How can I help? Can I take my steer from you? Hope that helps.
Emily?
I work for a charity. We deliver free first aid for anyone who wants to come and learn, and we've been working on making it as diverse as possible and accessible. Yeah. So we've had it translated to VSL. We're working on a visually impaired course, and we've purposely reached out to different kind of cultural organisations which traditionally don't get access to free first aid. So I was just interested to see kind of any networks that you would suggest that we tap into to get it out there even further.
There's quite a few charities working in the first aid space, which is really good. There's the big ones, obviously, and then there's a lot more of the local community-based ones. Interestingly, if you want to tap into different cultural communities, with many, I would say non-white communities, a lot of them are faith-based. So there's a great route. So a lot of the work that's been done with so I come from a Sikh background, and back where I grew up, the Sikh temple is kind of a community hub. So a lot of their sort of health promotion work, interestingly, is delivered through the temple. I think some of the people who work there are slightly problematic for other reasons, but it's a great way to reach the community through. Even though I'm not a particularly religious person, I know that that's a great hub to read, and same goes for Muslim-based communities as well. Often the mosque is the central part of their sort of central hub of their community. That's a great way, I think, of getting through to people. So linking with any faith organisations nearby. In terms of the other really good way of doing it, I think, is via schools. So first aid is now on the school curriculum. It should be taught across the country from September 2020, it's supposed to be, as part of the PSHE curriculum. Linking through that, because obviously there'll be, depending on where you work in the country, there's schools of different sort of diversity mixes. And if you can start there as well, that's a great way, I think, of maybe linking into some of the work that they're doing. And you can deliver some of their curriculum stuff for them, which would be great.
I'm sure it'd be worth you guys chatting afterwards.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Your kind of journey from doctor to media person kind of reminded me of Rav Wilden.
Yeah.
He went to my school.
Did he?
Yeah.
He works on the same show that I do.
Yeah, it's Kent person as well.
Yeah.
So, don't really see a lot of famous people from Kent, or like media people from Kent.
Yeah, you're right. Kelly Brook.
This is
Alice,
representation.
Yeah, there you
at its
go. Alice
finest.
Oseman,
People
who
from
wrote
Kent.
Heartstopper, she also grew up our family. So Rav and I, funny side story, we have the same agent, and Rav and I often get confused for each other, even though we look vastly different.
Is that the one person from my school who has any notoriety? But yeah, I just wondered if people from working class backgrounds going into media through like kind of the back door or a sideways route, is that quite commonplace in media? Do we kind of have to get in, round the back rather than going through the conventional routes?
So I think once upon a time, media was quite elitist in many ways, and you had to be. There was a certain way in, and you had to be from a certain kind of place. Fortunately, that's changing. And actively it's changing. And shows like I sing Morning Live's praises all the time because it's been built from the ground up. It's only a 3-year-old show, but they built that show with that particularly in mind. So they actively champion certain people or certain groups of people and will say, we want to bring more people into television, and they will go out and look for them and do that sort of positive sort of, helping hand kind of stuff. It is still trickier, I reckon, if you come from certain backgrounds to get into it. But fortunately, I think it's getting better. And it's only getting better because those people, when they get in and get up, start making things better. Just beware, there are a lot of organisations, I'm going to start getting a little bit sort of preachy now. There are a lot of organisations and channels and broadcasters that claim that they are doing it, that actually aren't doing it very well. So don't take what they say at face value. Ask the people at the ground what's actually going on, not the people at the top.
Anyone got a Strictly question? No? That one?
So you come from a medical background,
Yeah.
and that's obviously heavily influenced your presence in the media. Have you found that the creative industries has helped influence going the other way, whether that's kind of dealing with patients or colleagues? Or...
It's a great icebreaker in A&E, that's for sure. And I can always tell the sick kids from the non-sick ones, because the non-sick kids get all excited about seeing me in A&E, even in their parents, and the sick ones don't give a toss because they feel sick. So it's a great way of me gauging, like, you can go home and you probably need to keep in.
That also helps with the ego, right? You're obviously ill. You don't... Sorry.
The beauty of working in sort of the creative world has meant that I think a lot more laterally than I used to. And I think of different ways of doing things. And I also go back to the NHS and say that there's lots of the NHS that are still quite archaic in the way we think and in the way we treat people, particularly the LGBTQ plus community. There's a lot of work being... So the Rainbow Badge Project, which is an NHS symbol, was created in my hospital where I worked. And I was part of the start of that project. And it's now gone across the country. But that sort of thinking comes from these industries that are a bit more progressive in many ways, even though I think there's still a way to go. but it's definitely for instance, when I was working on Get Well Soon, it was the first time I'd ever worked with people with very different kind of job descriptions, but all sort of come together and it slots in like this big jigsaw puzzle. And it was taking that sort of teamwork stuff and taking it back to A&E and saying, guys, we could probably work a little bit better here. There's different things that we can do. I also get really frustrated at the way the NHS is crap at doing creative stuff. So I tried to take a little bit of that back. But I still do a lot of, with my hospital, I do a lot of sort of promotional work for them through various forms of media. So they've just opened a new day centre for day surgery for kids, which is like a brand new sparkling revolutionary centre, and I'm going to do the launch film for them. So I'm able to bring what I've got and some of those sort of skills and say, right, let's actually, and that's done for free for the NHS. So a lot of people have a go at me. There's getting on my soapbox again, saying, why are you on telly when you should be working and seeing patients? And anyone who's an expert will get that if they work in the media. And I always say that there's so much that I can take from what I do in media back and offer it as a positive. So, and also when I do a 10-minute segment on Morning Live, it's seen by 1.5 million people. When I do 10 minutes in A&E, I'm lucky if I've treated 2 people. So, you know, people don't necessarily see the side, that side of it, but I try to take as much as I can sort of back to it.
All right. You can, as long as it's a Schofield grenade.
Do you know what? I've been wrestling with the morality of asking something really highbrow. Going right.
Whatever you want, Stuart. The floor is yours.
Right. Everybody wants to know.
So you've done the books, you've done pretty much everything else. I want to know what's next. You're going to go in the jungle, or what's up?
You must have been asked.
I may not be doing very many ITV shows for a little while. The thing is with telly, it's like a duck on water. It looks all great on the top, and underneath it's frantically paddling. So there's always projects that sort of being talked about and in the pipeline, and we'll get to certain stages. Potentially waiting on. I'm doing some stuff with children in need. That's coming up. Potentially doing stuff with Stand Up to Cancer. I filmed a pilot for America not that long ago up here in Manchester, so I'm waiting to find out about that. I'm doing Panto, if anyone's in Nottingham at the end of the year. Still trying to wangle my way back to Manchester, but Jason Mansford's got that one. I like him. I very much, when it comes to my sort of career in general, is I try not to plan. So I just see what comes along, especially with media, because nothing's, unless you're, you know, Ant and Dec or someone like Ryland, where, you know, you kind of know you can get whatever you want. I very much just allow it to happen, and that's kind of how all of it has kind of happened. So, and if there was something massive that was happening, I wouldn't be able to tell you anyway. But I haven't been asked to do the jungle. I said I would, purely because it's my worst nightmare, and it would be pushing myself out of my comfort zone. But I think I may have stabbed myself in the foot with that one. But we'll see. We're always constantly talking about things and throwing ideas around and coming up with ideas for TV shows, and yeah. So, yeah. If anyone's got a TV show that needs someone, let me know.
I'm going to go there. Since you just talked about it, but what is it you love about Morning Live that this morning wasn't?
So I for anyone who doesn't know, I worked in This Morning for 10 years, and I left about 2 years ago. And I loved my time on This Morning. It's a fantastic show with really talented people. That does some really, really good stuff. And for 10 years, we did some really great stuff on there. And I've spoken quite publicly about this. My job is to look after people, and whether that's looking after them physically or whether that's looking after their well-being in any other way. And over time, I noticed that people, as is often the case in highly pressurized environments, people weren't very happy, and people weren't being treated very well, or as well as they should have been. And certain values that I think the channel was saying that we should all work by weren't actually being exercised on the ground. And I was like, well, that's not okay, when we need to do something about that. And sadly, because I kind of spoke up, I think I became more and more unpopular, because I'm a gobby person, and then therefore it was kind of like, yeah, he's a bit too mouthy for us, let's just kind of gradually show him the door. At least that's how it felt. But now I work on Morning Live, and Morning Live's kind of a show that's been built from scratch 3 years ago. Everyone's been trying to crack the daytime sort of TV space, and This Morning has dominated it for best part of 2 decades, probably maybe even 3. And it never worked until Morning Live came along. And Morning Live gets double the ratings that This Morning does. This Morning gets about 600,000 viewers every day, 700,000. Morning Live, only 3 years old, gets 1.2 to 1.3 million viewers. Wow. So that in TV terms is massive. It's a success story in a space that everybody else has been trying for so long. And I firmly believe there's 2 things about Morning Live, possibly more than 2, but there's 2 things about Morning Live that make it work. Firstly, well, maybe 3. Firstly, it doesn't talk down to its viewers. It's very much tries to cater to everyday people. It doesn't try to be something it's not. It tries to be as relevant as possible, and it tries to give people things that they can actually use or they need and be genuinely helpful. And secondly, we talk about this whole thing, and This Morning talks about it a lot, about being a family. This Morning Live is actually a family. What you see on the screen, that camaraderie, that companionship, that genuine love and respect for each other is real. And that's been built from the ground up. The boss of Morning Live, who's also the boss of the One Show, she says that her policy, she has a no dickhead policy. Because she has worked in places where that haven't had that policy, where it's been particularly horrific. She used to work on This Morning, interestingly. But she's built it with that culture in mind, that one, we want to be as applicable to everyone as possible. We want to give people a chance. We want to be as diverse as possible. And, you know, we want to look after people. Daytime TV is a grueling, intense, horrible environment. You can either say, right, we're just going to continue the learned helplessness and keep doing that, or you can say, hang on, why don't we actually make a change? Why don't we actually try to address this and make it better? And by doing that, they doubled their ratings. So there you go. It does work. Being nice, looking after people, and doing all that stuff that people say, oh, it doesn't commercially, you know, it doesn't pay anything or whatever it might be. It doesn't make business sense. It actually does. It genuinely does. When people are able, for instance, when people are able to be themselves at work and be authentic, they automatically become more productive. And that makes good business sense. And sure, as a business, that means you need to go a little bit extra, but you're going to get more out of your employees by doing that. When people are happy, you're less sick. When people feel like they're being looked after, they work better as a team. All of these little things, the fluffy things that no one ever used to pay attention to, and in TV was particularly bad at once upon a time, all of those things actually make a difference, and the ratings prove it.
All right, and don't be a dickhead. So we're gonna leave it there. Thank you so much. Can we thank Ranj?
Thank you.